And welcome back to Southeast Sports Plus. Another big week on hand around the SEC. Gerhard, Mathangani, Patrick Walsh with you. Expect to see Simone Eli here in maybe a little bit. We will talk a little bit more college football here. We'll do so with our good buddy out of Nashville, Julian Mininsohn. First of all, Julian, how have you been, man? I know it's really busy for you. I always feel for those that are like you, like in Nashville, where you have high school football, you have college football, you have the NFL. Once those all merge, once you get into the season, you kind of have a routine. But at the very beginning, I'm sure it's just like, juggling bowling balls and bowling pins and fire sticks and everything else. How's it been?
Well, if only there were a street with a bunch of bars on it to get away for a little bit in downtown Nashville. But yeah, you guys know the summertime gets slower for the sports sense of things. And so you go from that to all of a sudden you blink and the football season is here and you're at some practice, whether it be college or NFL every day. And then if not your Saturdays, it's particularly in Nashville, if not your Saturdays are filled up with college football, then you have your Sundays with the Titans. So yeah, it's been a marathon and a sprint all in one, but it's been a lot of fun.
I can imagine. And there's lots of reason for excitement for both the Titans as well as Vanderbilt going into this year, with the Titans obviously have a rookie quarterback, see if he's the guy. And for the Titans, you have an experienced quarterback who's probably the same age as a lot of rookies in the NFL, and Diego Pavia, who led a ridiculously good, strong charge last week in a big win over South Carolina. What do you make of this 4-0 start by Pavia, Coach Lee, and the Commodores?
Oh, man. Well, I think they've looked a lot better than maybe I anticipated, especially maybe a lot of the media who cover Vanderbilt anticipated. It's been an impressive start. And the biggest thing with this team that I think has been the most impressive is how the pieces have really, really come together. You think of, for example, the offensive line, which was the biggest question, or one of the biggest questions coming into this season, was you built it through the transfer portal, and you don't really know how that's going to go chemistry-wise and how they're going to fit, not just amongst each other, but with quarterback Diego Pavia, who wants to win right away. And it seems like that's been kind of ground zero for their success. I mean, they're running the ball exceptionally well. They had almost 150 yards rushing against South Carolina, which has a stout defensive front, and they had over 200 the previous week. And then that opens so much for Diego Pavia and the receivers, and they're getting a lot more explosive plays, which was one of the concerns from last year going into this year. Can they generate more explosive plays? And the number one thing also is to keep Diego Pavia healthy, and so far he hasn't needed to play like a superhero like he did multiple times last year. Just for them to be competitive in games, that's going to save him for the end of the year. When you look at Vanderbilt's schedule, they have the second toughest schedule in the country, according to ESPN Analytics. You need him healthy for October, November, December, when they're maybe making a playoff run by the way they look right now. So it's been all clicking on all cylinders, and they've played really 3 complete performances, which has been really nice to see.
Julian, I want to look at this game here heading into this week. It was a tough one for Vanderbilt fans to swallow last year, the loss to Georgia State, which, I mean, in hindsight, if you look at it Vanderbilt could have done some more damage had they not lost this game. They were down late in the fourth quarter by 12, as you could see there, and then they scored a couple touchdowns before the 25-yard touchdown by Georgia State to end the game. What is the vibe around the program right now heading into this week, trying to get some vengeance?
Yeah, right. So you think a lot of these ranked teams, and they go against kind of those winnable games, maybe the cupcake kind of non-conference opponents before they get into the bulk of their conference play. And a lot of the attitude for those teams would be, you know what, let's just get out of it healthy. Let's maybe work out some kinks against the live opponent, and let's dominate, get some rest, and get into the rest of our conference schedule. But for Vanderbilt, they're very much looking for, like you said, Patrick, revenge. I mean, that was not a good taste in their mouth leaving that game against Georgia State last year. You think of a guy like Ted Hurst, who you had on that graphic scoring the game-winning touchdown. He gashed them for over 120 receiving yards and 2 TDs in that game. That can't happen here. And you're thinking about a team that's not going to let up. Vanderbilt, they are not going to go into this game and overlooking Georgia State like maybe they did last year. One of the big things Clark Lee has said was the preparation maybe wasn't as good last year heading into this game. Maybe they were a little lackadaisical in preparing and overlooking and taking an opponent for granted. This Vanderbilt team, through the first 3 games at least, hasn't shown me that they are going to do that again this year. Best case scenario for the Commodores is they take care of business early on, similar to what they did against Charleston Southern to open open the season, and then let the second, third string guys get some action, let Pavia and the rest of the guys rest before you get into the bulk of SEC play.
Yeah, I said 4-0 at the beginning of this conversation. I think I was already giving them that win because they're a 28-point favorite, but you illustrated it perfectly that they will not be taking this team lightly despite being a heavy favorite in this one. I want to talk about Pavia's his past targets. We knew going into the season that Eli Stowers was going to be one of the best, if not the best tight end, in my opinion, the best tight end in the entire country. What do you make of his growth so far, his development so far this season? I know there were some injury concerns at the beginning of the year, but where does he stand? And then that receiver room and the tight end room and all the pass catchers that are making plays downfield?
Yeah, the big thing with Stowers is, like you mentioned, he was dealing with an undisclosed injury. Might have been some soft tissue stuff throughout the training camp. And then, so these early games, you just want him to get enough burn, stay healthy, because you're going to need him. Because when you have an Eli Stowers and you're going against the rest of the SEC teams, that's maybe one advantage that you have talent-wise that Vanderbilt maybe doesn't have in other areas. And so you need him healthy. He's been solid. The biggest thing with Eli Stowers, though, when he's on a scouting report for another team, let's say when they play LSU or Alabama later down the line, is not necessarily him putting up numbers, but him being out there is enough of an advantage for Vanderbilt, because you have to have defensive eyes on that guy, which opens things up for guys like Martell Hyde or Cedric Alexander or Trey Richardson, who we've seen all make explosive plays here in the early season going for the Commodores. So if it's not Eli Stowers making plays, it's him just being out there as somebody that you have to kind of key on defensively to maybe you're not looking somewhere else. So that's been good. The explosive plays have been like the biggest thing, I think, to me, because you score faster if you're Vanderbilt. That means you're getting off the field quicker, and that means you're not putting Diego Pavia in harm's way, because without him, this team, the castle crumbles essentially. So keeping Pavia healthy is number one, but then, having those pass catchers do what they need to do at certain times, that's number two.
I think one of the biggest things about Vanderbilt is going into this season, and you mentioned the tough schedule, but a lot of it's really backloaded. The fact that they've got off to such a strong start, how much confidence does that give them as they do head into, after this game and after Utah State, the bulk of the SEC schedule that does feature powerhouse programs like Alabama and Texas and a few others?
Well, we talked about it on this show, guys. Like, is there a path for Vanderbilt to get a postseason opportunity again this year? And I think there is. And I think we all agreed when we talked about it was, hey, you need to do most of your work out of conference, because the more work you do out of conference in the SEC, the less work you have to do in conference if trying to get to a bowl game is at least the minimum standard, which for Vanderbilt it is. Now, I will say they've looked a lot better than anticipated. Virginia Tech didn't look as good as maybe a lot of us had maybe thought, an 0-3 start and firing their head coach. And so that is something that I think Vanderbilt needs to do and take care of business in these next two games, because then if you take care of business here, you're one win away from a bowl game. We laughed at the start of the year, and I know I called Vanderbilt the hunters or the hunted instead of the hunters now. Right. But you're looking at the way they're playing, and it's not far-fetched to think that against maybe some of those Big Four teams like LSU, Bama, Tennessee, and Texas, the Big Four on their schedule, that, hey, if they go 3-1 or 2-2 against those teams, and then you beat the other teams maybe that you're supposed to beat, you're looking at an even better bowl game than just, hey, we're happy to be here. You're maybe even flirting with the idea of potentially being a playoff team down the line. Now, I know that's kind of putting the cart before the horse here. There's a lot of work to be done, but the way they've looked, it's not so far-fetched sitting there at number 20 in the poll.
With Clark Lee and the way that he views his football team, and then maybe even to the fan base when you extend it a little further, it feels like, well, if you're just a casual football fan, it'll be, yes, Vandy's 3-0, but they play Charleston Southern, but they played a Virginia Tech team, like you mentioned, that fired their coach, but they played South Carolina and beat them, but they lost their starting quarterback. What do you make of the way that they view these three wins? Because in my opinion, what the good teams do is they take care of business when the opportunity presents itself. You can only play the schedule. You can only play the team that's in front of you. And in my opinion, yes, people who might be shrugging them off, they might be proven right at the end of the year. But at this point, it seems to me that Clark Lee and company are doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. Is that the same viewpoint that Coach Lee has and the fan base there has?
Well, gee, I'm glad you asked that question. So full disclosure, I am an AP voter. This is the first time
I did see that.
yeah.
I did see.
Yeah. So I'm an AP voter. First time I'm doing it. I will say it is an imperfect system. Personally, I don't know if I'll get in trouble by saying this, but I don't think we should rank teams until week 4, because then we kind of see who's good and who's not, right?
Yeah,
I understand that. So, however, I will say the most hate I've received from any fan base about my poll is from the Vanderbilt fans.
Wow.
And I don't know if it's because they feel like I owe them something being here in the Nashville market.
Yeah.
That would be me being biased altogether, and we're not allowed to do that, as I'm sure you guys know. Now, I do want them to win because it's more fun to cover a team when they win, obviously. But, you know, the mail that I've gotten is, why aren't you ranking these teams higher? Why aren't you ranking this Commodores team higher? They're playing better ball than half the teams that you're ranking ahead of these guys. And my answer to that would be this. You beat Charleston Southern, which you should have done. As we've seen now, you beat Virginia Tech, which you should have done given the way the Hokies have looked. And then you beat a South Carolina team that was without Lenora Sellers. Now, it is an impressive win. Right. It was an impressive win on the road. You dominated, and maybe you still win that game with him in there because he doesn't play defense. Right. But you dominated that game, and that gets you in the top 25. Right. You do not get a gold star for doing what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And right now, I think, given the circumstances and the games that they played on the schedule, like you mentioned, they have done what they are supposed to do. Now, you've got to take care of business here these next 2 weeks. And then if you beat LSU, you go to Bama, you beat them, or you play them tough. Then let's talk about you being in the top 15, flirting with the top 10. But as of right now, I think they're justly ranked. I actually had them lower in my poll than the actual official poll that came out. I had them at 23, and they were in 20. Just because, you know, and this goes back to the, I think we should wait till week 4 because when you're a team like Vanderbilt, you do have to put in extra work just when you start behind the 8 ball just to get in the poll, as opposed to maybe a team like look at Notre Dame. I didn't have them in my top 25, but they ended up 24th, and they're 0-2. I couldn't justify it, but you're 0-2 and you still drop and you're still in the top 25. You know what I mean? So I think Vanderbilt's done what they are supposed to do, and if they continue to take care of business, the poll will speak for itself as everything else plays out across the country.
It's a very sober approach. I really, really love it, and I'm with you. I do think from an evaluation standpoint, I think we should wait till 3-4 weeks into the season. But of course, the polls and the preseason polls are just fun. You know, it's like, oh yeah, well, a good chance to talk about these teams and whatnot. And so it's really interesting. But and I like that insight. We'll continue to get your insights on the way that you vote as the season goes deeper and these games mean more and more. I had one last question for you before we let you go. It's an off the field question. It's Diego Pavia, and there might not be a bigger celebrity quarterback right now in all of college football. His name was
this guy, man.
I know this guy. He was all mentioned in celebrity gossip this week and celebrity talk this week because he got thrown in there with the comedian Theo Vaughn, and he said something about Tate McRae wanting to go on a double date and his mom. What do you make of what's going on there? Because Nashville has kind of become almost a celebrity town. It's akin, in my opinion, not obviously the same as LA, who you're very familiar with, or New York, but it's its own. Austin and Nashville have this own little flavor of like a hotbed of celebrities, and it feels like he's gone right into it. What do you make of this whole Tate McRae, Theo Vaughn, Diego Pavia? The floor is yours.
All I'm saying is, man, I hope it happens for the guy because that would be a good get on his part.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be awesome. And to have a guy like Theo Vaughn, who actually records his podcast in Nashville, he actually goes to the same haircut place that I go to here in Nashville. And they say he's a funny guy. He's obviously Nashville through and through. And if you've seen his stuff, he's a pretty funny dude. But yeah, if that happens for Diego Pavia, awesome. You know, I asked Diego at SEC Media Days jokingly, I was like, do you even have to pay for a meal in Nashville anymore? And he gave me the PR answer. It was like, I don't know what my NIL situation is when it comes to that, but it's been fun. So if Tate McRae does accept that date,
right,
it's going to be free of charge. Diego could go anywhere, and they'll take care of him. So that may be enticing for Tate to do it. If this is a call to action for that right now, because that would be crazy if that got to work. The powers that be of social media and influencing, huh?
I know. I have a niece who's 15 years old, and she loves her some Taylor Swift, and she loves her some Tate McRae, and this could be like the college version of what Travis and
my fiance's one of her favorite artists.
Yeah. I wasn't very familiar with her music until my niece brought her along. But you certainly have a whole bunch of interesting stuff to cover, both on the field and off the field as well. Julian, we always appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Anytime.